As humanity grows ever more reliant on machines, we may begin using them more and more in our own bodies, with many becoming cyborgs, possessing vast augmentation to body or mind. A civilization built upon such a difference may be a strange one indeed, and may be just over the horizon. Over 1 billion miles from Earth lies the dwarf planet Orcus, a frigid rock over 500 miles across that no sane man would want to live on, where the temperature is even lower than on Pluto. And yet, it was too vital a strategic resource to go unsettled even during the early days of solar expansion. The settlement there was never very well funded, and in many ways existed merely to cement ownership by having a present and active colony base. Indeed, they often had to attract colonists from any place willing to send them, or often as not, people who came there with a past they wanted forgotten and no previous home they wished to claim. The original nation that successfully claimed it fell to history's wayside, leaving it in a rare position of finding itself independent without having to fight any battles with fleets or attorneys. The citizens there were not entirely thrilled at their new status, for they found themselves in the unenviable position of being cut off from any support. Forced to live on a frozen rock with few trade prospects, it was not an easy life, and many of the citizens had embraced heavy physical and mental augmentation. Indeed, some had abandoned the cylinder habitats embedded into Orcus's surface, providing gravity and air and warmth for a more cybernetic life in simpler accommodations. Some had even abandoned spacesuits, growing so heavily augmented they could walk on the surface itself, often merely as heads and spine on a robot chassis, or even simply a brain in a jar, or an armored canister. In this way they needed far less food, which was very difficult and energy-intensive to grow, and were largely immune to disease, illness, and aging, all of which seemed to afflict the more traditional baseline humans of Orcus far worse than more civilized places, closer to Earth. Some criticize how augmented they've become, and say they have abandoned their humanity, and many on Orcus say that isn't so, that humanity abandoned them, and they did what they must to survive, that they are cyborgs, but still very human. Yet many of the citizens of Orcus, pejoratively known as orcs, revel in what they consider their newfound freedom, able to live in this world as comfortably as others might live in a paradise, and able to enter virtual paradises whenever they wish. They are strong, fast, able to take on other shapes even, should the humanoid not suit them. Many think and act far faster than a typical human. For the people of Orcus, theirs is an increasingly cybernetic civilization. Some would call it human, some post-human, and some even inhuman, but a civilization nonetheless. So today we'll be looking at cyborg civilizations in both a more near-term context and a later post-human scenario. But first, we probably should start by asking what a cyborg actually is, and as we'll see, it is a very broad term and indeed rather vague. Words have a tendency to mutate through usage, and cybernetics is a great example of that. It's a term that popped up in the late 1940s with an origin in Greek and ship sailing that amounts to the art of steering, and was being used in the context of controlling machines with feedback systems or complex biologies, ecosystems, and even traffic in cities. The term cyborg popped up later as a shortening of cybernetic organisms, and was in reference to modifications we might need to survive away from Earth. It initially was more focused on the idea of using medications and regulatory machines to let a person, or an animal, function or adapt to alien environments. It got hold of our imaginations in science fiction though, and quickly came to mean mechanical additions to a person, and later, when computers became smaller than people rather than filling entire buildings, to mean computer augmentations of our minds too. We have discussed cyborgs before. It has its own dedicated episode. Indeed, we did an episode on cyborg armies last year, and it highlighted how much different the superhuman is when we move it from a single figure, like a comic book hero, to a large number of people. Every so often an author in science fiction or fantasy will try to imagine a world where everyone has superpowers or magic, and it is usually a horrible idea from a story standpoint, and leaves a reader wondering why things aren't way better when everyone is superhuman in some fashion. Why isn't their world more of a paradise? Or, to contemplate it from a more pessimistic perspective, why their world isn't a charred cinder. After all, in a world where everyone is the equivalent to a weapon of mass destruction, it's not unreasonable to wonder what's stopping mass destruction from occurring regularly. Now, on the one hand, our comic book portrayals of cyborgs are often wildly over the top, as being a cyborg might be very little different than being a regular old person. On the other hand, in the long term, if technology improves in the ways many expect, being a cyborg might be putting someone on a level with a comic book hero, and 1,000 times more lethal for being super intelligent too. Today we'll try to focus on the more scientifically realistic aspects of cyborgs and civilizations in which they're common. As usual, science fiction just gives us some interesting and handy discussion points and examples. We do need to understand that cyborg is a very broad spectrum of options that would probably be better thought of less as a subspecies of human and more like a broad category the way mammal is, or even animal. And indeed, in a post-human context, thinking of the concept of human that broadly might be a good approach too. It also has no useful technical beginning, because a tooth filling might count as easily as a big metal arm, as might a more primitive prosthetic. Surely a pacemaker or cochlear implant for hearing must cross the threshold into cyborg items. It's also rather debatable if the devices even need to be in you, or replacing something in you. Someone with glasses or contacts is arguably not much different than someone with an electronic eyeball, and what difference there is would seem well inside the range of what the glass eyes many people missing an eye often use, except that this eye might function to permit vision with it, and it would seem almost certain it would have a camera capability. In this same way, we must acknowledge that in a higher-tech civilization, becoming a cyborg is likely to be mostly optional. We may be able to regrow or clone replacement organs, as opposed to replacing them with something mechanical, and where some augmentation or new ability is being granted by the cybernetic bit, in many cases something worn or in proximity might serve just as well, or near enough to make little difference. We often see some cyborg in sci-fi with built-in weapons. It is hard to imagine why one would waste that space on a big gun or sword when they could simply select one to carry for necessary occasions. Something like a cannon grafted to your arm and tied into your brain so you could aim it probably can be replaced by wearing some eye patch or monocle with a targeting system in it. I don't really need to have a phone system wired into my jaw and ear, or directly into my brain's auditory centers, when I can wear an earbud and carry a phone. Indeed, if I don't want to carry them, we might imagine hands-free systems in homes and cars superior to what we have now. And even a drone that might meander along with you carrying your phone and a microphone or speaker, or even a directed sound beam that could aim at your ear. Virtual reality headsets might get heavy, but newer ones might be far lighter, or even have ways of taking the load off your head and neck. This is why our initial example is on Orcus, one of the tiny dwarf planets or maybe just a large asteroid that straddles the hazy line between planet and asteroid. Not a great place for artificial spin gravity, since it has a non-trivial regular source of local gravity. Not a place where solar economy is really feasible anymore. You can certainly run your environment on nuclear power. I'm optimistic we'll get fusion going practically someday, at least for the large-scale sort of reactor meant to provide gigawatts of electricity, but absent it or something better, you either run on classic fission power, or huge parabolic mirrors concentrating vast areas of diffuse sunlight into something more useful. There's also no guarantee we would ever have such casual automation that we could be economically running multiple megawatts of reactor or solar farms for every single person, which is what is honestly needed to replicate a terrestrial environment. You could probably make do with less sunlight, or replicated sunlight, than the roughly 1000 watts per square meter or 100 watts per square foot that represents peak noontime sunlight. It is obviously not noon all the time, and much is in frequencies we don't even see. But even a tenth of that would mean some quarter-acre or tenth a hectare suburban homestead needs a whole megawatt on average to keep the grass green. There's no big parks or farms included in that either. That's 10,000 times the power it takes to keep a human alive. Incidentally, your metabolism runs on something closer to 100 watts. Your brain itself, more like 10. On the flip side, we have worked on the numbers before and found that even 10 kilowatts could probably keep enough light on hydroponics and algae vats to generously feed a human, and a diverse diet, including meat at that. There's more than enough fissile material out there to keep some very large civilizations running for millions of years at that scale of energy demand. And, of course, the far more abundant supply of potential fusion fuel like hydrogen could keep such a civilization running for half of eternity. But just because you have abundant fuel doesn't mean you have cheap power. Most of the modern cost of electricity is not fuel. Uranium is not cheap. It can cost hundreds of dollars a kilogram and more for decently enriched stuff, but you get around 24 million kilowatt hours out of that for a few $1 million worth of electricity in modern markets. And yet, as fond as I am of nuclear and as much as I tend to feel regulation strangles its profitability quite a bit, even at $1,000 a kilogram, you are only paying about 0.004 of a cent a kilowatt hour for the fuel, a few thousand times less than we pay for electricity, which is all in building and maintaining the reactors and generators, substations, and vast lengths of wire involved. If we imagine a more mining and breeder reactor-oriented civilization pumping out fission fuel for even cheaper than now, it really would not change the cost of the socket much. That's why greater automation is so important to such civilizations. But without it, well, we might imagine the cost per kilowatt hour was just 4 cents, and then someone needing a kilowatt all day every day is spending $1 a day, and someone needing 10 kilowatts to run their hydroponics per person, just $10 a day, a few hundred a month per person. And that's plausible enough. We don't need to be that much better at automation and that much more prosperous to make that possible. Indeed, it's a fairly critical line of reasoning behind a lot of discussion of near and mid-term space colonization of our outer solar system and how we might colonize neighboring systems. But someone needing to light a lawn using a megawatt is spending $1,000 a day on that, and more if you want classic farms or gardens, and now you're spending thousands of bucks a day on juice. And that's very much a post-scarcity sort of setup, where the overwhelming majority of work generated is by robots, so either everybody has way more money on average, or everything costs way less. Same difference, at least for our purposes. And as we often note, just because you are post-scarcity does not mean you are wasteful, so you might have a civilization entirely capable of providing a gigawatt per person, but cringing at every wasted kilowatt. After all, energy stockpiles in a finite and entropic universe are limited. There's no such thing as a free lunch, and even growing lunch is 99% inefficient using that 10 kilowatt hydroponic setup. So for the folks on Orcus, every calorie counts because it takes 100 times as much energy to make one energy unit hydroponically as their bodies got out of it. Living in a place where the sun is twilight bright even at noon, they may strive to find more efficient options than food. 100 of them could live plugged into an electric socket in the place of the grow lamps for one person. And even if they were running their brains on normal food, that still drops the calorie needs down to someplace between a fifth to 10th of normal. Maybe it's an artificially synthesized nutrient too, not the byproduct of photosynthesis. They just pump it into the machine that makes and oxygenates their blood for distribution to their remaining fleshy bits. Proteins, fats, and carbs do not have to be produced by plants, animals, or photosynthesis. The sun is just insanely abundant as an engine for driving the process. To them, growing a cow is a waste when they can stick some tiny augmentation into your mouth, tongue, eyes, or nose and make you feel like you're eating a real steak, and indeed could eat a big one with all the trimmings and fixins and dessert afterwards, because you don't get stuffed or fat, it's simply virtual. And they could stimulate your sense of feeling full or satiated too. Your mileage may vary on if that's awesome or grim as heck. I'm not really sure which myself, maybe both. But the key thing is that you can make a very strong case that this is a superior existence. Steak and champagne every day, no heart attack or hangover to follow. Moreover, you can make the case that this is a morally superior existence too, since hundreds of times as many people can be supported in this cybernetic splendor than our hydroponics case, and far more than our current open-air farming, as sophisticated and productive as it is compared to the past. We are not able to say if that's truly the case or not, or interested in trying. I use it as an example of a route to how such a civilization might catch on. By necessity or more compulsion pushing them to adopt cybernetics. It's hardly the only one either. For my part, assuming it was well tested for health concerns, safety, and privacy, I'd have no problem with a robotic eye, all things being equal. It might grant me the ability to see in other wavelengths of light, or zoom in on distant objects to see them, or even simply to snap some photos or videos in the blink of an eye. As a parent who already missed so many firsts in his kids' lives, it acutely hurts when a Kodak moment passes without my phone quickly to hand, or having to mess around with it to take a photo or video when I'd rather be interacting with the moment. I also already wear glasses anyway. If this were a sci-fi story, I'd presumably get headaches from the fake eye, or people could hack it to spy on me, or even trick me with fake images sent to it. Since Dune 3 is confirmed to be under production, I'd be curious to include the discussion about artificial eyes that starts up in that book, Dune Messiah, as a recurring point of contemplation in the series, and mostly not as a good thing, though not necessarily bad either. There's also a wonderful scene in the classic Star Trek The Next Generation episode, The Measure of a Man, where Commander Data inquires why, if Geordi's visor is clearly superior to human eyes, every Starfleet officer is not required to have their eyes replaced with one.
Lieutenant LaForge's eyes are far superior to human biological eyes, true?
Mm-hmm.
Then why are not all human officers required to have their eyes replaced with cybernetic implants?
Picard, in a rare and excellent moment, has no answer. And it is a question that will likely come back up in the real future as this technology emerges.
It is precisely because I am not human.
I think we are all rightly horrified at the idea of anyone being required to get cybernetic replacements, but even peer pressure to get them seems rather bad, and may be a good deal stronger than the pressure for modern cosmetic surgeries in that it could tangibly benefit society. But there's no reason to assume any of those other fictional downsides, headaches or getting hacked or never truly seen properly, would be real and long-term problems, as opposed to early model issues soon fixed. Indeed, a fake one might save you headaches from screen fatigue or allergy season. Advanced technologies can also be used to hack normal organs too, with some creativity. We are beginning to see prosthetics with sensitivity to them, new hands or arms that let a person feel, even if only crudely. One more step on the long road between hooks worn on stumps and real replacements that can feel and touch, and maybe would feel like skin to another's touch. I think this is an attainable goal, and even in our lifetimes, and I think most would agree to it being desirable. But for many, while this goal is admirable, it should be the end of the journey, while others would want to see it improve, and also to be available to those who had a healthy limb. Again, I cannot say if that's a good or bad thing. Our bodies influence our minds quite a lot, and whole new or improved senses might have negative effects too, much as we might worry a person with superhuman strength or acumen might develop a god complex. Many of us on the techno-optimist or transhuman side of things tend to feel this is a good path to pursue, but we don't want to assume concerns over adding superhuman or inhuman abilities to us can have only positive consequences either. Whenever has any piece of technology not turned out to be a double-edged sword? While I picked the colonization topic in part because it's familiar and because it's an example that would apply to many of our other discussions, it's also a good case of a new and fragile society. New movements often start at the centers of civilization and work their way out, but just as often they emerge on the edge, literally in the case of distant outposts, or in the more metaphorical sense of a subculture that already feels on the fringe. We took some time to step through the colonization math because, as mentioned, it comes up in a lot of our other discussions in other episodes, but also because it lays out a powerful mathematical pressure. Necessity can force changes where stagnation can occur in more stable or prosperous circumstances, One of the silver linings of economic recessions, or wars or pandemics, is that they can allow changes that would otherwise either take a very long time or never occur, albeit there's often a lot of misery involved in that, and many of those changes aren't always great ideas either. But it emphasizes how a civilization might find itself having folks choosing to embrace more Spartan approaches to life, and in this case more cybernetic approaches, because they feel it is a necessary or ethical choice, and often we decide what was necessary was indeed ethical after the fact. Needless to say, we can get rather biased in those post-change rationales. Now again, cyborg is a very wide zone of options. It might range from minor physical augmentation to massive brain augmentation that raises IQs or thinking rates by orders of magnitude. It might be human-scale prosthetics or subcellular level nanomachines, and a whole ecology of nanobots and microbots inside us. Indeed, this is already the case. We are full of trillions of machines. Those are just naturally evolved and specialized cells and viruses. I'm not sure someone becomes a cyborg from having medical nanobots inside them, but I do feel it shouldn't matter if those nanobots are tiny metal machines or genetically engineered or bred cells and viruses retasked to act as tools and machines. Or indeed it might be a civilization where you are those tiny machines, a trillion little nanobots of various types and sizes glued or tethered together to hold the shape, appearance, and feel of a human, each one replacing a biological cell, and with you continuing as a human mind, but able to rearrange yourself like any shapeshifter from sci-fi and slide under doors in a house. Or even that you were that house, with no real clear delineation between your remaining organic bits and body and all the machines in, on, or near you, and with your consciousness able to move around in that structure freely, your body being more like your avatar for interacting with others. What is a civilization composed of folks like that going to be like? Or is it even still a civilization? On the one hand, it could be an amazing one, a high-tech civilization with few fears of mortality where people might have far greater stamina, and maybe getting any number of mental augmentations or even more mundane but sophisticated medical assistance for everything from anxiety and depression to anger management or maintaining focus. This isn't necessarily electronic, mechanical, or pharmaceutical either. Simply having lots of good monitors on your body can provide advanced warning of ailments, trigger instant alarms to first responders, complete with detailed information about the problem, not to mention excellent data for rapid and accurate calibration of any type of treatment, even something mundane like letting you know which activities improved your mood best, and can recommend you go kayaking or go get some mint chocolate chip ice cream. We never want to attribute everything to technology itself. It's really knowledge and understanding that enhance civilization. Technology is just one of the larger vectors for that. Knowledge is power. This can be a possible bane to a civilization though, as people with vast access to knowledge, technology, and cybernetic augmentation can basically abandon civilization to do their own thing. They don't really need anyone anymore. A sufficiently advanced cyborg can explore a billion virtual utopias they carry around in their own mind while living on an airless rock in deep space. They may not even need a personal spaceship or some habitat and power generator. They might incorporate all of that into themselves and be able to live off eating rocks and running internal atomic power plants. And again, all while enjoying steak and champagne every virtual night and being able to tweak their own internal wiring so they never got bored of it, or bored of anything if they wanted. A cyborg civilization is one where boredom or anxiety or fear or loss or loneliness or any other emotion can be damped or flicked off, or dialed up to 11, as they choose and when they choose. They may not feel society can offer them much, while alternatively, they may feel hanging around with others poses a real threat to themselves. So they go off on their own or in small groups, something we examined as a Fermi paradox solution in our episode The Hermit Shoplifter Hypothesis. Now on the flip side, they may be very attached to their groups, indeed they might have a network connection to others. Speech is slow, and while we can pack a lot into a sentence, especially with body language added in, being able to exchange megabytes a second is going to give you way more options. Even if it isn't something akin to a hive mind, Instead, with full privacy and firewalls in place, how nice would it be to be able to recall an image at will, or not even need to type it into Google or say it to Alexa to get your search? Now, how much better if you cast such a thought over to a friend? Here's what I was picturing. Here's a replay or text-to-speech of the last 2 minutes. Here's my position and location. Nothing all that revolutionary, but so much faster and easier and clearer now. It's a society that might even be able to bypass representative democracy for direct democracy or demarchy at times simply by how easily important decisions could be explained, discussed, and voted on. I'd say there'd be far less violent crime and theft, but that's true of any higher-tech civilization, for the same reason they need to worry about slipping into being Orwellian or turning into police states. When everyone has a camera on them all the time, and a network connection, and might be running something like a one-time pad on all their recordings to prove authenticity when needed, crime gets a lot harder to get away with. Neutral arbitrators have a much easier time getting the real event that occurred between 2 or more people and showing them what happened, whatever they might think had. As usual, it could be a utopia or dystopia, depending on how it was run, and the eye of the beholder probably too. They may be somewhere in between and migrate on that axis over time, like any other civilization. The key thing is there isn't an it, because there's a billion different variations of how this might play out, and a billion variations of what a cyborg might be. And in a galaxy of billions and billions of star systems, there's a lot of room for those variations to arise, and to change over time too. I do not think we'll have to wait for all colonists to spill out from Earth and settle out to the galaxy's edge to find out though, or even to another star system. I think we'll see it even in our lifetimes here, though we won't call it that even as we don't call people cyborgs now with prosthetic arms or pacemakers. As the technology improves, as we get more familiar with its capabilities and pitfalls, we'll see more of it on Earth and more out in space, where early futurists rightly guessed cybernetic organisms will likely be more common, including non-human ones. This might include pets and even plants in some respects. At the same time, I would stress that with knowledge and technology, not only does the door open to these options, but to many other options too for those who very much do not want to go down the iron and silicon road. As to the inevitable question if our own civilization will become a cyborg civilization, I think it's the wrong question. Rather, I think the answer lies in knowing that if we embrace space, Earth and humanity will give rise to billions of disparate civilizations, from the noble to the foolish, the kind to the malevolent, from those who eschew or abandon most technologies to those that embrace them and incorporate them into their very minds and bodies, and that these too will come in a billion different kinds. In our discussion today, we contemplate how a deep space settlement low on energy and resources might turn to cybernetics as an answer to create a cyborg civilization. But another pathway a remote civilization might pursue are stasis vaults to store or freeze their civilization till it can be rescued. They also might create planetary archives to tell their story and keep it safe against the vagaries of time or tampering. In this month's Nebula exclusive, we'll be exploring those technologies and what their uses are for civilization and how that usage might shape such a civilization, including those that might have mini-citizens regularly going on ice to leapfrog forward in time. That's out now on Nebula, where you can see all our episodes early and ad-free, along with exclusive and bonus content from myself and many other creators, like our monthly Nebula exclusive episodes. You can join now for about $2.50 a month, about the price of the drink or snack you've been enjoying during the episode, but we also now have lifetime memberships available and gift cards that let you share Nebula with friends and family. When you sign up at my link, go.nebula.tv/IsaacArthur and use my code IsaacArthur, you not only get access to all the great stuff Nebula offers, like planetary archives and stasis vaults, you'll also be directly supporting this show. And again, for those of you who want to share everything Nebula has to offer with your family and friends, Nebula is now offering annual gift cards. Use the link gift.nebula.tv/IsaacArthur to give a year of Nebula to a friend for just $30. Cyborg civilizations are just one way we might settle the stars, And on July 11th, 2024, we will look at many more in our 2.5 hour long feature-length summer special, the Interstellar Colonization Compendium, covering everything from the ships we'll use to get to other stars, to how we'll use them and what we'll do when we get there. After that, we'll look at the idea of ancient dormant alien empires on July 14th. Then we'll contemplate the idea of the fine-tuned universe and what its implications would be if true, especially for the Fermi paradox. If you'd like to get alerts when those and other episodes come out, make sure to hit the like, subscribe, and notification buttons. You can also help support the show by becoming a member here on YouTube or Patreon, or check out other ways to help at isaacarthur.net. You can also catch all of SFIA's episodes early and ad-free on our streaming service, Nebula, along with hours of bonus content like planetary archives and stasis vaults at go.nebula.tv/isaacarthur. As always, thanks for watching and have a great week.